Hi, I am Devanya Govan Hunt, and I lead the Charlotte affiliate of the National Black Child Development Institute. And we are super excited because we are uplifting pillars in our community this week for National Black Child Development Week. Today, we are going to have a conversation with two giants in our community, one people that we consider giants in our community that have been fighting on behalf of our children, families, and communities for a number of years and still continue to do so. The National Black Child Development Institute's mission is to improve and advance the quality of life for Black children and families through education and advocacy. Our mission leads to us focusing on 8 future outcomes for Black children and families. Those 8 future outcomes include um, a future where Black children, all Black children, can live and play in a safe community, are born at a healthy weight, attend a school that affirms and expands them, enjoys meals with vegetables, hangs out on a safe and appropriate internet, has books and toys that reflect who they are and who they can be, where they breathe clean air and drink clean water, and are seen as a child. They live and play in a safe community. Those are our 8 future hopes and outcomes for Black children across the country. The way that we work towards those outcomes in Mecklenburg County are by operating in 5 different buckets of work. Those buckets of work include community and family engagement, literacy, health and wellness, policy, early childhood education, and so much more. Today, we are here with two individuals who have worked diligently over a number of years to make sure that our children and our families, our communities are supported in all of those areas. And we're super excited to lift them up and spotlight their work in our community today. So I'm going to turn to Mr. Griffin and ask him to introduce himself first. Hi, Mr. Griffin.
Hello. How you doing today?
I'm well, thank you.
Wonderful. Well, my name's Arthur Griffin. I'm a native Charlottean. I currently serve at an at-large position on the Mecklenburg County Board of County Commission. Prior to that, I've served as chairman of the Board of Education here. I worked very hard to bring the National Black Child Development Institute to Mecklenburg County in 1985 when I think it's Evelyn K. Moore, I think, was the executive director at the time. And I've been involved with issues impacting the Black family for a number of decades, and all the wonderful things that you just talked about in terms of the focuses has been something I grew up with here in Charlotte, North Carolina, in terms of expectations. I could talk a little bit more about those expectations and some specific strategies and actions that I've been involved with over the past decade. And I guess we'll talk about some of those shortly. But excited to be here and to share with you and your audience today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Ms. Tolliver.
My name is Eleanor Tolliver, and I'm the owner director of First Ward Child Development Center. And I've been in Charlotte for almost 40 years, and been involved in the early childhood community for those years also. And I've seen a lot of change in the early childhood community and things that we've been going through on a statewide level, on a national level, and have to be involved because we have a tendency to be reactive instead of proactive. And we have to stay on top of things in order for our children to get. And we know that it's a rough world out there, you know, and looking at the 8 outcomes of our national focus, I think about the one that strikes me the most, and that's, you know, a child being a child. And, you know, I look at the children I serve every day and the children I see in other child care facilities, and our children don't have a childhood. They don't have a childhood. And that's very disturbing to me, disturbing to me. And so I've been working with BCDI for a number of years before we had a charter here. And, you know, now that we have one for last 15 years, really working hard to make sure that our children get what they deserve.
Absolutely. Well, we are absolutely honored to be able to engage in this conversation with you all. We are always looking for opportunities to learn, to be better, to make sure that we're carrying the torch that you all lit for us, right? So the first thing that I'm curious about, because there's a lot of experience sitting up in here, lots of experience, and particularly in Mecklenburg County. The first question I want to ask is, how are we doing? How are we doing?
You know, I was asked the question about how are we doing some time ago, and the way I phrased it for someone else was, I still have hope, but the data makes me feel troubled about the future. And what I mean by that, Mecklenburg County has done a number of just great things in terms of startups and bringing wonderful, young, intelligent African American women and men to Charlotte, like you, Dr. Hunt. And I'm so hopeful for the potential that's here in Mecklenburg County. But the trouble side of me is when you kind of peel back the covers and sort of look at the data as relates to African American families and children that are not getting a chance to participate in the great things that are happening in our local community, intellectually, educationally, economically. And we still need to work very hard to make those things come true. I first got involved with the Head Start Policy Council, but even before getting involved with the Head Start Policy Council, many decades ago, I was always involved in what's happening. I grew up during the transition periods of civil rights. I went to an all segregated school here in Charlotte, grew up segregated community here in Charlotte. So as I was maturing and growing up, there was a book, they're talking about banning books. I hope they don't ban all the books, because what I learned back in the 60s, Michael Harrington wrote a book called The Other America. And it talked about the two Americas, one black, one white, and what was happening. And shortly thereafter, there was something called the Kerner Commission, where it talked about who had for lack of a better term, the worst options for healthcare, for housing, for education, and it happened to be the black family. And so that sort of got me involved with the work around children and the African American experience. And one of the things that really started the ball rolling was data. And so I think when you look at the data and answering to your question, what's our current status, the data will show Mecklenburg County is doing very well as a community, as a whole community. But when you unpack that to look at the opportunities for our children and our African American families, we have much work to do, and we can talk some about those specific data points a little bit later on. But a data point of premature deaths, meaning you die before age 65. You may graduate from high school, but you don't have the literacy and the computation skills that you would expect a high school graduate would have. And what's the results of that? The results of that are you're not as successful that next stage in life, meaning at the colleges and universities, the dropout rates are much higher. And of course, the student loan debt is much greater when you leave and don't complete. But the other part of that, as the economy continues to grow in a technological way, you still lack the skill set to work in a technological advanced workforce, because for example, you can't work on a Tesla automobile. It's a computer on wheels if you don't have an appropriate literacy skills or don't have appropriate computation skills. So it's almost like Jesse Jackson would say, like in 1984 when he was running for president, we're now able to go in a restaurant and sit at the table, but we don't have the money to buy what's on the menu.
And I agree with you, Arthur, and I think there are a lot of factors out there that are affecting our Black community. Knowledge is one. You talk about the test as an example. There's a CPCC campus that has a Tesla training center, certified by Tesla, one of the few in the country. Not too many people know about it. How do our people know about things like this? Because there's a lack of information getting out there, to the Black community, and when I look at our children that we serve in our communities and our child care centers, and I look at what they're doing, we have a high expulsion rate of
Right.
Black children in child care,
Right.
There are so many emotional issues going on with these children, with these families, that there's really a lack of a strong support system for them, we use the film Resilience a lot in our daycare center. Make all my staff watch it. We talk about things. If this is you, then you need some help. If you haven't gotten worked through this, But I also did this fall a session with a professor from UNCC who came in and did a men-only session with my fathers. They watched the film. They talked about it. They had an excellent session. I mean, they really talked about this thing. Because COVID did a number on all of us. I don't care who you are, what color you are. COVID did a number on, and is doing a number on all of our children. Emotionally, they're a wreck. And so when he did the session on the mothers, he had them fill out a questionnaire. And he brought it to me. He did all the statistics. He said, this is disturbing. It's disturbing. I said, what do you mean? He said, look at this. He says, this woman says, after watching this film, I should be nicer to my child. You mean tell me she wasn't nice to her child before this? He said, look at this. These parents saying, I said, calm down, Dr. Yoko. It's a start. It's a start. But we've got to get our parents the services that they need in order to support these children.
Wow.
I mean, I would 100% agree with that. But what I always say to folk today, when we were coming up, the environment was segregated. The environment, not only in terms of racial segregation, economic segregation, but there was a sense of togetherness in terms of the African-American experience, where we would sort of reach out to one another, and there were certain norms that we'd certainly want our children to do a little bit better than what we were doing. And that was sort of passed down without any billboards or special workshops. It was sort of something that was in the air that we breathed back then. And I agree with you 100%. We have to get that atmosphere, that oxygen back in the community, where we're loving each other and having high expectations for each other and for our families. Is certainly something that I think is absolutely needed today.
We need the village back.
Yeah,
we need the village back.
That's a really, really great, great point. And has been like lived experiences and whole families and communities. The village has been centered in NBCDI's work as long as I've known about it, right? So with that being said, how do we get back there? Like, because you hear a lot of we hear the statistics, we know what they look like on paper. Many of our families and communities are being knocked over the head with statistics. And it's almost feels like a fault finding conversation when it's initiated. How do we build on the strengths of our communities that you just described, when we lifted each other up, when we, be nicer to your kid, or, let's do this together. How do we get back there?
Share that knowledge, that information, and those experiences. We didn't have a formal program in the neighborhood I lived in right around the corner here called First Ward, but it was all Black. And as you would walk up and down the street, you would be exposed to lessons in behavior, lessons in working with other kids, lessons in terms of how to respect and treat older folk. And you would learn lessons of how to be creative. We didn't have the expensive toys, but we'd figure out how to make a bat and a ball with a stick to play games, etc. So it's how do we're going to have to love each other more in terms of communications. Me walking around with all this information and data is not worth a nickel.
Right.
How do I share information and opportunities with the rest of my community? And we didn't have cell phones, and we didn't have
iPads.
We didn't have all of that. We just had word of mouth walking up and down the streets. But some of us who have that data and information need to figure out how to use Facebook. Or for me, I'm not that technologically sophisticated, So I reach out to young folk that know this stuff and say, hey, will you put this on Facebook, or would you put this out somewhere so that others could at least get the information? Because I believe deeply that if people receive that information, more people would be able to act on it in terms of the village.
Now, Ms. Tolliver, you are in what I consider to be a unique position as an early care and education provider. You have your hands directly on teachers, on children and families every single day. And I think that, in my opinion, and probably the opinion of many others, that early child education is undeniably an essential fabric, right, of our society. And in fact, could be a vehicle used to accomplish what you all just described in terms of building children and families. How do we engage more diverse perspectives, or private sector, government, the corporate world, in the conversation about the importance of an equitable early care and education opportunity for our children?
I think it's going to have to come. I look at it as a triangle. The parents are going to have to speak up, because this is affecting their livelihood. Child care providers are going to have to speak up, because they need to make a life, and you can't do it just off of parent fees. Parent fees are getting to be really outrageous, but in order for child care providers to operate, they need those funds. It's going to have to be, the businesses are going to have to be involved, because they need to realize, without these workers in child care taking care of these children, that their workers can't come to work. It's going to be, all three have to come together to do this. And North Carolina has one of the highest populations of working females in the country. If we want our economy to move forward, we've got to come together and work together. Child care workers have to be better educated about what goes on, the makings of the system, what's going on in the system, how it's affecting you. Parents need to be better informed, about what's going on in Raleigh, how is this affecting your child? How is it affecting you as a family, because they've got to speak up. And, as an industry, we are reactive instead of proactive. We got to get out there and we've got to stand up for what we know is right. One lady who was said they were lobbying in Washington not too long ago, and they talked to one senator or something. He said, this is your time. He said, and don't settle. Don't settle. We've got to get to the point where we cannot settle. We can't be afraid. We've got to stop being afraid of what it's going to do to us, and take that step out there on faith.
Wow. Those are some lessons. I'm sitting here taking mental notes.
Yeah. Ms. Tolliver is so right. We're going to have to stop being afraid. And as I've always said, you lead, you follow, you get out of the way, but there's a lot of talent and opportunity. And in healthcare, for example, healthcare, I got all the human services on my brain right now, but in childcare, my two children went to Central Piedmont daycare center when they had a daycare center there. And the cost of quality childcare today is really, really expensive. But we have to be creative in the community in terms of engaging the private sector and the public sector and the educational arena, and figure out how can we continue to provide quality childcare for our babies. And I think the opportunities are there. We just have to push the system to be more supportive economically. For example, I would love to have had a chance to have Ms. Tolliver to run a dozen childcare centers in our public schools, for example. In schools, not be a public school person, but to have that facility where you don't have to be responsible for the facility costs, that the building is there, that the utilities are already there, the rooms are there. You just have to manage a quality childcare operation without the headaches of balancing the cost of the physical structure, because you already pay for it with your taxes and it's just there. So I think there are creative ways to increase that for the Black family.
Hold on, let me just jot that down.
Say what?
To request.
And just a passage. I'm asking the folk on the county commission, help me understand better as we support our preschool kids, their readiness for regular kindergarten.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just simply a gap because we'll do the brigades or another program, but when they go to kindergarten, they have to do the early literacy inventory, some kind of something, but they have to do some kind of assessment within the first 10 days.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to have some alignment. So there are some things we can do. And whereas Ms. Tolliver hugs and loves on her parents, there's something that happens because they come to school every day to pick their children up.
Mm-hmm.
But when they go to public schools, it's
A
like
different story.
So then the question that I
story.
always have, Mr. Griffin, to that point, because you're absolutely right, and we do remind our officials, anybody that we're talking to, or engage in a conversation about the strengths of and the genius of parents and families, and particularly in this conversation, Black parents and families, is that they do want what's best for their children. And the fact that they can deliver their children on time every day with a washed face.
2 times a day.
Yeah, pick them up. That's a plus. Like, that's a strength-based thing. So the question for me is, how does the alignment occur? Is it that the children are not prepared for the K-12 system, or the K-12 system is not prepared for the children?
In a lot of cases, the K-12 system is not necessarily prepared for the children. It's a mixture. What we tried to do when I chaired the school board, we created a program called Bright Beginnings. I guess it's still running now. I don't know whether it's running or not, but and so we found that our kindergarten teachers were not prepared if we had a literacy-based pre-K program, because they were still doing the alphabets when those kids were up. They were going beyond the alphabet. So we found that we had to realign the expectations of the adults in kindergarten to receive those kids who were ready for kindergarten work. I would prefer that experience, that because we can certainly push those adults to get better prepared. But what I would hope that we're doing a better job of is making sure that those 4-year-olds are absolutely prepared for kindergarten readiness now. So I'm hoping that. I'm not as in touch with that as I used to be, but I'm hopeful that we're preparing those kindergartners, those preschool kids for kindergarten, and because we can really push that system. But if we're not ready, there needs to be some data or some communications about an alignment. Is the preschool program and the preschool graduates aligned and ready for public kindergarten? I'm hopeful that it is. I just don't know what the data says.
So
right
you're
now.
probably on the edge of your seat right now.
Yeah.
So jump in. Tag, you're it.
I think they're ready. The children are ready. The system's not ready. The system's not ready for them. Our children go out the door. They know their alphabet. They've got phonemic awareness. They're ready. They get to kindergarten, get these teachers who are looking at them like, where do I go now? I was taught to do this and this in kindergarten. I don't have the flexibility. I don't have the training to adjust my things. My curriculum is not designed for that. The teachers don't know what to do with these kids. They truly don't. And in Mecklenburg County, we're blessed because we've got all these pre-K programs, free pre-K programs for these children. We all have very strong curriculums. When these children leave, the majority of the kids in Mecklenburg County leave these pre-K programs ready for kindergarten.
So what happens?
I said the teachers aren't ready for them. The schools aren't ready for them. They don't know what to do with these kids.
So that might have something, because we struggle with literacy rates, proficiency when it comes to literacy, not just in Mecklenburg County, but across the state of North Carolina, across the country, really. And I've always found it fascinating that these very similar conversations about our children and across state lines are very similar. right? And what we're talking about, the level of the lack of proficiency, reading proficiency. Mr. Griffin, where do we start? Because our children are brilliant,
Oh,
right?
Mhm.
So where do we start?
there's no question about the intellectual capacity of our children. They can take a cell phone
That's right.
and teach a class in technology
At the age of 3.
on a cell phone.
What does that mean?
They can do all kinds of things. But what we have to do, particularly the grown-ups in the room, are going to have to engage the system as it relates to expectations. Because if you don't expect our children to be able to be successful in the classroom, the system is not going to generate that internal push to make sure that they are successful. And I'll give you uh, many examples. We now talk about low income kids or poor kids or disadvantaged kids. Hell, I didn't even know I was disadvantaged until
somebody told us.
until somebody told
I'm
somebody
what?
said
Okay.
you were eligible for a jobs program
That
during the
deficit
summer.
language.
I think we're going to have to do a lot more work as grown-ups in that space as we talk as Ms. Tolliver talked about the village. The village is going to have to be able to have high expectations for the whole village, not just some in the village. Because my experience, I'm sure, as Ms. Tolliver, is that the teachers had high expectations. Miss Lucille McKay, my 7th grade teacher, she lived on 7th Street too. She said, you could talk that junk outside, but when you come in the classroom, you're going to speak the King's English. I mean, we were diagramming sentences on a real blackboard back then just to make sure that
a real black
a
boy.
real blackboard. You know, now they call
That's
whiteboards
okay.
and Promethean boards, and they call everything.
chalk.
The chalk. They had real chalk too. Real chalk on your hand. But my point to you is uh, the leaders, because families, parents expect the best. Parents want their children to be successful.
Absolutely.
So you start with parents wanting their kids to be successful. You start with children who want to please and want to be successful. We're going to have to make sure that system that we participate in, that society that we live in, is made aware of how best to make that happen for our kids. So it's going to take NBCDI, it's going to take organizations that love our babies to share with the communities that they reside in that this is the way to go. And a simple example is phonemic awareness. Ms. Tyler talked about phonemic. I'm not sure when people thought we didn't need to have phonemic awareness.
Yeah, we just learned sight words. This is it. Spell it out.
I don't know where that came from, but now we're circling back to say here are some skills and expectations we need in terms of how children learn the language and how to use that language and how to use it effectively because they have the skills.
Right. I think Arthur made a good point with expectations. You know, I just had my preschool graduation, and I told the parents, I said, "Now this is graduation number 1. You got 7 more to go." The 7, I said, "Yeah, I want kindergarten, elementary school, middle school, high school, bachelor's degree, master's degree, and I want that PhD." I said, "Yeah." I said, "But it's up to you, parents." I said, "You have got to expect this from your children." I said, "You got to be their support system." I said, "You got to show your face at that school, the good, the bad, and the ugly." So let those teachers know that you're concerned about their child. You know, I gave them an example of my child who was a special child. You know, he's a child who takes things literally. He did something one day, and it was my husband said, "Boy, I'll kill you." He went to school and told me we were going to kill him. You know, I got this phone call. I don't think you need to come to school, right? But if I had not been an involved parent, they wouldn't be calling the Department of Social Service on me. But they knew me. You know, they knew my child. You know, I said, "You've got to show your face. You've got to do what they need you to do." I said, the other thing is reading is fundamental. When they send those notes home school, read them. Don't leave them in the book bag. Don't leave it posted on the wall. You've got to read because you have to read in order to stay abreast of what's going on. And as a parent, that's your job.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely.
And when you empower the parents, share with them. I mean, I can just, like I said to you earlier, growing up in First Ward, the teachers would use our assets, not our deficits,
Yes.
our
Mhm.
assets,
Yes.
to make sure that we were able to receive,
Yes.
to understand it and master it. And examples would be we would like boys, we were out shooting marbles on the
Mhm.
ground. Our teachers would end up teaching us geometry lessons
Mm-hmm.
out of shooting marbles in terms of the angles. They would talk to us about shooting pool because they knew all the things that we do in the neighborhood.
Mhm.
They just made language art lessons or math lessons out of things that we would do. And they'd tell the little girls, you're not supposed to be watching Days of Our Lives on TV, knowing they're gonna sneak and watch the little soap operas. But the teachers would say, who's the protagonist?
Yes.
Mhm.
Who are the characters?
Mhm.
What's the plot? And so take the assets, because people have milk, what a gallon is, how many ounces makes a gallon. There's so many things in our children's day-to-day lives that you could really teach any kind of lesson
Mhm.
in language or mathematics.
Mhm.
And so the opportunities are there.
Mm-hmm.
We just have to have the willpower and the expectation that this is how we're going to achieve excellence in this particular uh, academic content area.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow, that's powerful. Reminds me of some of the professors that I had in undergrad that led me into the field of early education with high levels of expectation and reminding us teach the way the children learn. Don't
Mhm.
expect them to learn the way
When
you
you
teach.
teach. Amen.
Find the strength in every last one of them
Mhm.
and meet them where they are before they cross that threshold into your classrooms.
Mhm.
So that's powerful stuff. Powerful stuff. And the way you phrase it, you guys make it seem so simple.
So what?
You all mentioned a couple times I heard the term system used. Ms. Tolliver, what is the early educator's role in shifting the system? I always tell people burn it down and let's
Start
try
over
to
again.
yeah. But while we're figuring out how to light a fire bright enough and hot enough to burn it down,
Mhm.
in the meantime, what is the early educator's role here in Mecklenburg County to systems change, to shifting the way that we think about Black children and families, or even early child education?
I think it goes back to education again, and that's educating the providers. You know, they have to have it in their head that every child that comes in that classroom is a brilliant child.
Mm-hmm.
They have to have the expectations, like you said, expectations. Those providers have to have those expectations to pass on to those parents, you know, and to their teachers. It starts with those providers. You know, you have to have the knowledge, but you've got to have it in your heart and know that that's a brilliant child, and that child is in your hands. That's our future. You know, that's our future. And if you miss out that future, you better watch where you're going. 'Cause that future will have to take you to nursing home one day. No, but
That's
you know,
right.
we have to. It has to start with us. You know, we can't expect anybody else to do it for us. You know, we waited too long for that. They're not going to do it. It's up to us to do it for ourselves. You know,
Absolutely.
and we've got to start with the providers. The providers have to say, you know, okay, this is my job. And I think oftentimes it's really not a job as much as a passion. But it
Right.
should be a passion.
Mm-hmm.
It should be a passion. You know,
Mm-hmm.
if it's jobs, you just need to collect a paycheck. Your
Right.
passion is there to help these children, these families.
Absolutely. Commissioner, what's the county's role in shifting and achieving systems change in terms of the way we think about some of the topics that you all just spoke about?
I wish I could do a heart transplant. It's
True.
what I used to always say and do when I was involved with the schools more directly, and particularly with superintendents and school board members. I would say, do you believe?
Mhm.
Just, do you believe that all children can learn and learn at high levels? I mean, I start with that premise. Do you believe? Because in the political world, folk would say, well, you know, they're low income or they've had these experiences. And it was just a backhanded way to say, I really don't believe that they can learn at the level that they should to be competitive. So I like to push the system from the county commission perspective, and some of my colleagues I had a debate with one of them about schools and learning, and one would say, well, they can't read if they're hungry. I said, do you know anything about the African American experience?
Mm.
Do you understand what slaves had to do in order terms of how to learn to read? Not only were they hungry, they were tired, they were beaten, they were abused, but they reached out to learn how to read through the Bible or any resources to do that. And I share practical experiences. NASA has the ability to teach chimpanzees how to count and how to communicate. And if we can teach a chimpanzee how to count and communicate, you mean to tell me in America, in this vast land of opportunity, we can't teach a kid just because their families aren't millionaires? I don't accept that. So first, I try to share with my colleagues wherever I'm at, do you believe? And then if you believe, then there's a way of working with you to demonstrate that belief in practice by looking at the assets and not the deficits in terms of doing it. And you specifically asked me a question about county commission. What I'm asking the county manager to do right now is to come back to me and tell me if every one of our Met pre-K students are ready for kindergarten. That's what I want to hear. So I want to come back to this data thing that I started off with originally, because I think that's informative, to just tell me, here's 1,000 youngsters that we know we're sending off to public kindergarten ready. And because we spend probably $600 million a year or more with the public school system, I want to know, what are we doing with those kids who are coming into kindergarten ready? So show me the data so that if there are gaps, I want to know why there's a gap, and then how do we address those gaps?
Ms. Tolliver, sounds like there might be some room to propose some funding for those private childcare centers who are sending children off and proven to be, in fact, beyond ready for kindergarten, so that they can support your data collection efforts, right? So we're close to time. I can sit here and learn from you all day, like literally. But while I go back and recap our 8 future outcomes that Dr. Leah Austin has helped NBCDI to come to actually develop here, what an equitable future for our children look like, I want you to think about, throughout all of your years of experience in your field here in this county, in the state of North Carolina, what's the 1 or 2 things that you have? Like, what charge do you have for us? How do we march forward to continue to make things better, or fight to make things better for our children? Think about that. And I'm gonna remind our audience of our 8 future outcomes. Adjust. What does a just future, an equitable future look like for Black children? Every Black child will be born at a healthy weight. Every Black child will attend a school that affirms and expands them. Every child will enjoy meals with vegetables. They will hang out on a safe and appropriate internet. They will have access to books and toys who reflect who they are and who they can be. They'll breathe clean air and drink clean water. They will be seen as a child. They will live and play in a safe community. Those are the 8 future outcomes for Black children. And NBCDI needs your support moving forward in order to continue the fight to achieve those outcomes. They do sound like basic human rights. I know they do. Every time I read them or look over them, I say, these are basic human rights. And in 2023, we are still reciting these basic human rights. So there's a whole lot of work to be done, a lot of work to be done. And there is a place for you. As long as you can roll up your sleeves, you can wake up every day, you know a Black child, if you were a Black child, if you serve Black children and families, there is something that you can do to help us achieve these outcomes using the strengths and the genius of our children and our families. So our last question for our brilliant panelists here, Ms. Tolliver, Mr. Griffin, what is our charge?
Well, I will steal a phrase or try to paraphrase something that Martin Luther King Jr. said. If you can't fly, run. If you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl. But whatever you do on behalf of justice and what's right for our people, keep moving. So I would say to you and all of those who are viewing this experience, keep moving towards justice for the entire Black family and the Black experience. Folk like myself that serve in an elected office, I will try to push whatever institutional barriers over to the side, given the forum that I happen to participate in. But I want to make sure that that door is open so that you can keep moving, whether you're flying, running, walking, crawling, but just keep moving through those doors of opportunity on behalf of our children.
Thank you. Yes. Ms. Tolliver.
Faith.
Yes.
You got to have faith. But faith without works is dead. You got to have the people, everybody's got to step up and do their part. We've got to have faith and hope that we're going to make a difference. We have to for our children's sake, for the sake of our race. We have to make a difference. We got to have faith that we've got people out there who want to step up and help do it.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you. Well, there you have it, folks. From the Carolinas, we are celebrating National Black Child Development Week with pillars of our Black community. We are here with two giants. They have given us our marching orders. We are to have faith. We are to keep moving. Whatever you do, keep moving. Thank you so much, Mr. Griffin. Thank you, Ms. Tolliver, for spending time with us today and for sharing your wisdom. Thank you for the work that you've done to get us to this point. Thank you for giving us, for carving the path out for us. Thank you for believing in us, and thank you for holding us accountable, for continuing to build on the work that you all have started. We appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.